Hey guys, Barry, William E. Magliotti here from the Comeback Game, back for another episode of the Comeback Game podcast. Today I've got Ronan Leonard from Accountability. Ronan's an expert on really helping people to understand how they can deliver their expertise through multiple different ways to obviously make more money and create a business more of their dreams. And I also heard that back when you were 23 years old, you helped rescue passengers and fellow staff from a ship cruise when it sunk off the coast of South Africa. So I'd love to dive into that as well. Ronan, mate, thanks very much for joining us. I'd love if you could just share with the guys out there watching and listening to this today a little bit more about you, what you do and where you're from.
Oh, sure, Barry. Thanks for having me on the show. Really looking forward to it. So a little bit about me. I left school having no idea what I wanted to do, probably quite familiar. Way back then, the careers coach said, what do you want to do? So my dad works in the tax office. What does your mum do? She works in the tax office. Great, that's you sorted. Now, end of conversation. What I didn't figure out until, life's bumps and roads is that I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I just knew what I didn't want. So I had several jobs where I worked in there and I looked at and I projected myself 5 years forward and said, this is not me. And I just quit those jobs. So rather than sort of sticking it out, they just really weren't for me. And that led me to get a job on cruise ships. I started traveling the world, bought a round the world ticket, and then got this job on cruise ships. Well, within 6 weeks of working on ships, I was on this ship that sunk off the coast of South Africa. Huge storm, 60-foot swells, 160-kilometer-hour winds, and all the lights went out. And that wasn't the scariest part. The scariest part was all the officers and crew who were Greek, never told us and abandoned their posts. So it was just this incredible scenario where I worked in the gift shop at the time, green, knew nothing. And we filled one lifeboat with women and children. And again, I wasn't 100% sure we were definitely sinking. And in the other boat, all the senior officers and crew left. And I'm talking the staff captain, the chief engineer. Well, so they left. So there was this crazy sort of experience, but it didn't put me off. I spent another 9 years working on cruise ships. And then when I left there, I set my first business up when I came to Australia and then sort of pivoted from there as well. Because I also hit that point again where I looked at my business and said, do I see myself doing this in 5 years' time? So pretty much everything I've learned has been through trial and error, accident, and to be honest, there's never been a set sort of formula apart from this last business. I finally sort of wrote down a vision and a goal. So that's how I got to where I am today.
Yeah. And how long have you been running Accountability?
So the Mastermind programs have been going about 3 years now, and I sold my previous business about 2 years ago. So I was on the cusp for a little while. I was still in my existing business and started a new one. And I found, certainly for me, that I need to focus 100% on one business. I can't run two, especially when they're completely opposite spectrums. So it was what, as to use a poker analogy, what am I going to go all in on? And all in was on Masterminds.
Yeah, cool. What was the previous business, out of curiosity?
I used to run an events business. So I took all the skills of when I worked on cruise ships afterwards, I worked in the casino. And I saw the fun side of casinos. People were gambling on ships. They were on holiday. They weren't locking their kids in the car and spending money they didn't have. It was just pure entertainment. So for a decade, I ran Australia-wide up to 300 casino party events. So incredibly niche, and sort of grew that niche as far as I could. And then, as I said, projected forward, it was time to do something else.
Yeah. You didn't happen to host any of the underbelly black market casino events there in Melbourne, did you?
The Underbelly show used our tables to film the show. So
there you go.
Scenes, yeah. So they used our tables.
I was having dinner the other week in Melbourne at a place. Can't think of what it's called, the Wine House or the Wine Place or something. And we were told that was the one of the spots they had, one of their black ops underground casinos before the police raided it and busted them.
Yeah. So Melbourne has a fascinating criminal sort of history that goes with that.
Yeah. So, mate, I want to take a kind of step back for a second, and the podcast is all around like the comeback game story, and what I've certainly realised over the time, and I'm sure you have yourself as well, is that our greatest successes and our greatest levels of growth come from the biggest adversities and challenges that we're faced within life. It's really those challenges and adversities that allow us to grow. And if you look back into your life over the past 10, 15, 20, 30 years, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome within yourself And what have you learnt from them to be where you are today?
That's a great question. Obviously, the cruise ship, what it taught me was that you should always question authority. And I'd had a run-in with the captain a couple of days before the ship sunk. So I actually thought I was going to get fired. So I'd already sort of questioned his authority and pushed back. And as it turned out, the fact that everyone sort of demurred to him, when push came to shove, he was supposed to be in charge, and he basically abdicated his responsibility. So that was a really good lesson for me to say, okay, well, you might be a CEO, or you might be somebody that's in charge, but there comes a point where you go, I don't think this is right, or you question that authority rather than just automatically giving to it. So that was a really good one for me, and I've taken that throughout my life. I've often pushed back and said, okay, well, please explain to me, is that more? So that was a really fundamental one. But I've also bumped up against my limiting beliefs all the time. And it's one of those things, when I first started my casino party business, I sunk my life savings into it. For 9 years, I worked on cruise ships, saved up all this money, sunk it all into a business without a business plan, without really having any idea of what I was doing. I'd never run a business before. And to be honest, I got lucky. I finally met someone who sort of showed me what I didn't understand and sort of helped me along the way, and became a bit of a mentor. But what I understood is that you can read all the books and you can have all that theory, but until you actually try something, you don't know it. So I remember sitting down my very first event, and I'd run this event for about 60, 70 people in this corporate environment. And I sat down at 2 a.m, having carted all these tables in, run the event. Everyone saying, "No, it's fantastic," all that energy, excitement. And I sat down and went, wow, I can do this. But up until that point, I didn't know. It was just a hypothetical theory that I think I can do this. And I think that's a really strong point, because we're overwhelmed with information at the moment. Everyone's telling you 7 easy steps. You can do this, blah, 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 grow your email list to 1,000 in a week, et cetera, et cetera. And everyone just bumps up against these limiting beliefs. Is that me? Can I do that? Or, yeah, I know that. People say that all the time. I know that. I know that. But until you actually try it, you don't know it. And you don't know how far you can go until you start testing those assumptions.
Yeah. Yeah. How important do you feel that mindset is in growing a business and in living a prosperous and successful life?
Oh, it's huge. And again, I didn't realize this probably till about sort of 5 years ago, when I went to my very first mastermind. My existing business had grown to a certain point, but I had no sounding board. I had no benchmark against other people. What we tend to do is you look at our competitors. What are they doing? Is this all there is? And it's only when you surround yourself with people that have that growth mindset, that really sort of have the abundance and really challenge you, that you finally sort of say, okay, I potentially I've got much more in me, and I'm playing a safe game. Can I push myself harder? Can I create some kind of legacy, authority, whatever that is, and really sort of push yourself? And again, it does tie back into the previous answer I gave, is that everyone goes, yeah, I understand mindset, but do they? Until you sit down with someone else that challenges you and starts to push back on you, you don't know what mindset is, and because you're playing at a different sort of space.
Yeah. I often share that the perception of reality is realer than reality itself, because the way that we see the world is not the way that the world is. We see the way the world is through the way that we see the world, through our own filters and our own experiences. And as you shared, it's not until somebody challenges our assumptions, challenges our rationality, that we can start to actually see the world differently than what we have in the past.
Yeah, exactly. The stories we tell ourselves are the most powerful ones. And until something comes to break that, and someone shows you a different way, a different idea, and you actually implement it, that's when that perception changes. But up until that point, you're believing that 100%. You will always believe the stories you tell yourself, rightly or wrongly. And often they're quite negative. We're hardwired to look for negative news. That's why I don't watch the news anymore. I stopped about 5 years ago. So we're always looking for these doubts and fears. And certainly when you work as a small business owner in isolation, that's your sounding board, is yourself, and bumping up against that. So yeah, 100% believe you on that, Barry.
Yeah. So let's run with that. Let's talk about a different concept. I want to talk about ROI, and I'm not talking about the ROI that everyone speaks about, return on investment. I want to speak about your methodology, return on intellect. Can you share with the guys and the girls that are watching, listening to today, a little bit more around your methodology around ROI?
Yeah, so what happens is that most subject matter experts get stuck doing what they do, and they just then do it in perpetuity. And it's that idea of you haven't had 20 years in business, you've had the 1 year repeated 20 times. So there are some really smart, amazing people out there, but they get to this point where all they do is just deliver what they know, and they're real subject matter experts, but they never achieve authority. And so to achieve authority, you need just one thing: you need to teach. And when you start to look at, okay, I've got 10, 15 years experience in this industry. People love what I do. People come to me and say, how do you do that? Most of the time experts dismiss it because they're in that little bubble. Oh, it's easy. Easy for them. Not for other people, it's not. That's your genius. So then you look at that and say, okay, well, I can't take any more clients because I'm too busy. I won't even advertise. I work with some people that say, I'm not going to advertise anymore because I don't want any more clients because I'm already doing 50, 60 hours a week. And at that point you go, okay, well, how do I leverage this? How do I get a better return on intellect? And it obviously means that potentially not looking at your existing clients and saying, just do more of the same. It's how can I teach what I know? How can I provide a shortcut for other people? And how can I package up my intellectual property to get that better return on intellect? And finding different ways to do that. And there's multiple ways to do it. It could be a book. It could be a podcast. It could be a course. It could be a training program. It could be a mastermind. One of those things will get you more customers at a different price point, whether higher or lower. Lower might be a course where you're not involved, or higher might be a mastermind. But it's just looking at that and saying, okay, you've got all this intellectual property. Let's find different ways for you to utilize it rather than doing the same thing again and again.
Yeah, it's a really great insight. I had one of our recent podcast episodes with Dana Derricks from the States. And what I loved is this guy made a decision at some point to package up the knowledge he had into a book. But what he did very differently to most people is that he didn't choose to sell his book for $20 on Amazon. He actually chose to sell his book ranging from $2,000 up to a couple of $100,000 he sold the book for. And his way of thinking was just, well, if my time is worth this much money, if my intellect, if my skill set, my knowledge is worth so much money, why should I go and discount myself and sell it for $20? And the guy has now become super successful. He's got 16 plus books, various costs, but his kind of core book, The Dream 100, he sold several copies at a $2,000 price point because he made a decision to do so. And this is where, coming back to the previous conversation we had about beliefs and about mindsets, about the way we see the world, this is where I see that so often business owners can get caught up. Like you mentioned, that they've done 1 year of business and repeat it 20 years in a row, because we get stuck in and fixated on what we perceive that we know, or the way that we perceive that we should do things, and we stop innovating.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the only way you go to authority is you start to innovate. So there's that, first of all, you copy someone, then you mimic people, then you hit mastery. And mastery, I think, was it Seth Godin defined, or Malcolm Gladwell defined it as 10,000 hours working on something. It doesn't have to be that long. You can get there quicker. And then you go to innovation. And the innovation is truly where you share and you then create that kind of legacy and that pure purpose of not just, as I said, just working on clients one-on-one, trading time for money or doing what you still do, but creating that, sharing that knowledge forward. And we're, to be honest, we're starving for real knowledge. There's all this information out there. There's all this content, but there's a lack of context. And so people, going back to my very early point where I was saying about people don't know stuff, they know it because they've read the information, but to apply it to them is that context. And if someone can give you that shortcut of, okay, it'll take you 4 or 5 years to find this, to read all these books, to trial and error, here's a shortcut that I know because I've done this for the last 15 years, I can repeat this, then that's a really, really good return on intellect and getting people to think about that. And the second they do, something switches, and again, they start to push up against those limiting beliefs, but they also see that there's a potential there for something bigger than what they're currently doing. And that's what we want. We're all striving for goals. We want to do something bigger than we currently have. Every company and every business owner says, how can I be better next year? But it's not the incremental, how can I be better and get 5 more customers that I've already got at the same price point? How can I do something that is bigger?
Yeah. I heard an interesting story. I've heard it a few times about FedEx when they, the conveyor belts went down. They were literally losing thousands of dollars every minute that the conveyor belts weren't working. And they hired a consultant or contractor to come in and fix it. And the guy walked around the factory for 5 to 10 minutes, walked over to a switch on the wall, flicked the switch, and everything just turned back on again. He sent them an invoice for $10,000. And they said, well, this is just, extravagant. You were here for less than 10 minutes. We want it itemized. And so he said, okay, I'll send you through an itemized invoice. And he went away and retyped the invoice, and he said, turning on the switch, $10. The knowledge, skills, and expertise to know which switch to turn on, $9,990. And I think this is where, belief comes into it, is that, it really does start with the belief that we have to be willing to go and charge for the knowledge or the expertise that we do have. And the moment that we have that belief and conviction in us, we allow others to have the belief and conviction in us as well. Like if I said to the guys listening to this today, guys and girls listening today, hey, if you give me $10,000, I'll give you 40 hours of my best content that I can guarantee you will return you at least $100,000 in revenue. Like how likely are they to purchase that? Possibly. But if I said instead, hey, if you give me $10,000, I'll give you the one key strategy in a 5-minute conversation that I guarantee will 10x your income, which one would you take? Because people don't want to pay for that knowledge. People don't want to pay for 40 hours worth of content. They want to pay for that one switch to flick, that one thing that will see their business or see their life transform.
Yeah, it's like, as I said, that sort of shortcut that people want to pay for. So you do have that intellectual property and you want to get that better return on intellect. It's the exact same thing. It's saying, okay, well, and you don't always know that. Once you're a subject matter expert, you sort of get bogged down in the detail and you think, got all this information, I've got all this expertise, but often the market wants just sort of one thing. And you heard of, you obviously would have known of King Kong marketing here in Australia. Sabi Subri started a course through Founder, and it was just around scaling your small digital marketing business. I think 350 or 400 people signed up for that because that's his key IP, is that, okay, let me show you how I scaled, because that's what they want. So the market, sometimes it's not always what you think of your expertise. It's often just that something a little bit off center that, okay, they don't want to know his marketing techniques. They want to know how he scaled, which is almost counterintuitive. So you ask the market, what's your biggest pain point? And you find that. So you're spot on.
And I say that that's a mistake a lot of business owners make, is that they have this passion for something, or, they have a passion, and let's just say their passion is coaching. And so they think, I'm going to go and start a coaching course on specifically this, yet they fail to interview the market. They fail to listen to the market. Now, it's not to say that they can't follow their passion and can't be a coach, but specifically how they coach or what they teach, particularly the coaching, depends on the market. And I think that, the greatest business owners that I see, the most successful, are the ones that actually spend time understanding what their market want, like you share. I was reading a book this morning, Retention Point, and he was talking about the fact that, if we had 60 tablets set up streaming YouTube, we would need to add an additional 60 tablets, I think, every week for the rest of our life to even possibly come close to consuming the content that's online. And so like you share, I don't think there's a limitation of content. I think there's a limitation on the right content, on accurate content that's going to really help people move forwards.
Yeah, and it's why people are sort of niching down. The idea of being a growth hacker. So back in 2010, Sean Ellis defined the word growth hacker. He worked for Dropbox, and he was their marketing. He turned this phrase. Now, if you look on LinkedIn, I looked on a couple of months ago, there are 22,000 people all calling themselves a growth hacker. Right? So how do you stand out? You become a growth hacker for doctors, or you really niche down and then your target market. And then the doctor says, oh, why should I work with you? So, well, I know the market, I know your pain points, I know the language that you use, that your customers use, and it's an easy sell. So you as a growth hacker, you're going to get far more doctors on board than trying to be a growth hacker for everybody. So you do have to sort of niche down and really know your market. And when you do that, you know their pain points and you talk in that language, and that's all marketers do. They just talk to the pain points that they know people have because they've done the research. And I've previously done that. I called up last year. I was working in the virtual CFO space, and I called up 30 virtual CFOs, and they all told me the exact same pain point that they had. And it wasn't what I assumed, because I was looking, okay, well, do they want to run sort of a mastermind? And are they at that point now? Because it's quite an early industry, sort of niche. And they all had the exact same pain point. So I was sending some marketing out based on that, and it resonated with them immediately because they'd all told me. And it's the simplest thing of just calling up and saying, what's the biggest problem you're facing in the industry? And they all just told me, just a simple phone call. But the ability, we all want to hide behind the internet these days. We don't want to speak to our customers. The mantra is get a SaaS business or get something where I never speak to a customer again. That would be awesome. But you miss out on the fact.
Yeah, and they just pay me thousands of dollars every month about me doing nothing.
Yes, yeah. Look, it does happen once you scale, but for the most part, when you speak to your customers and just ask them some of those simple questions, previous customers, suppliers, they'll tell you. We all complain, right? When we catch up with friends, we talk about sport, talk about family, and then we get on to bitching and moaning about something. So we're hardwired to complain. It's pretty easy to get your target market. Ask them that question, and they will tell you flat out.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think the biggest challenges people have in niching down?
I think they feel that they're going to get stuck in a niche, and you don't have to. You can always broaden out once you've sort of nailed it. So, especially if the skills are transferable. So, I think they think that there's thousands and thousands of customers out there, or there's millions of customers out there. I'm going to miss out if I niche down. But certainly by niching down initially, you get to really hone your message. You get to get those great results, and then you can then expand back out. And what you'll often find is even when you niche down, you talk to a certain audience, but then it resonates with other people if your message is good. So you'll attract people that you probably weren't expecting and didn't know. So you will still get those extra benefits. So yeah, highly encourage people to niche down.
Yeah. Where did you get your marketing expertise was? Like obviously, working from cruise ships and so forth. Where did you pick up the skills that you have now around marketing and obviously avatar identification?
Oh, like you, it's a question of reading. You said you read a book this morning. I now read voraciously. That's pretty much all I do. I block in half an hour each day to educate myself. So it's just that long sort of spiral of trying things and they don't work. To be honest, I'm not a great marketer. I'm the first one to admit it. But I've read things like the One Sentence Persuasion. Have you heard of that?
No.
I'll send that to you afterwards, actually, and you can drop in the show notes as well. It's about the 5 key things that people really sort of desire. And then there's the 5 levels of buyer awareness. And you just you just go on that journey where, you read Eugene Schwartz, you read copywriting by Gary Halbert, you start to look at these things about, open loops, and you just start to pick up enough to get you into trouble. I still outsource some of that things to the people that really it's their obsession, their passion. I know enough to get me into trouble, but and enough to sort of understand that someone else can do it better than me, but I can at least check their work, so I'm not getting someone that knows nothing. But it's a lifetime of learning about everything. The Road Less Stupid, one of the best books I've ever written.
Keith Cunningham.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Just those people that you start to pick up just a couple of ideas from there and run with them. And what I like to do is that I teach people in my masterminds how to do that thought leadership thing where you come up with a model and a metaphor and an idea and a story, and you tie that all in. And again, just through learning, you just go deeper with your content, and you just become this more rounded person that's able to really articulate the ideas that are sort of half formed and transform them into something that people are really interested in.
And if any of you guys listening today would like to learn a bit more, actually episode 4 and 5, I think it was, one was with Kevin Halbert, and one was with Bon Halbert, who's the great copywriter's sons.
Yes.
Gary Halbert's sons. So fantastic interviews if you want to check out that a little bit more as well. So Ronan, like if you look back at your life, like imagine that you're having a conversation with an earlier version of you, like a younger version of you, like what advice would you give him? If you could instill upon him all of your wisdom from today, like what would you share with him?
That's a good question. I think half the things you have to learn, you have to go through, you have to experience them. So you can tell someone at 25, 28, you should do this. And they'll go, yeah. I mean, I just come back from holiday and I caught up with my niece who lives in the UK and I haven't seen her for years. And I just talked to her about reading books, and she talked about being quite stressful and meditation, because I've meditated every day for the last 4 years. Yeah. So she's like, yeah, I'll meditate. So what happens is you sometimes need to hear those 7 times. It's a bit like marketing and buying stuff. You need to hear that meditation is good for you 7 times until you'll try it. So my only advice would be to probably just listen a little bit more, and rather than dismiss, I know that. And I think that way you will be able to sort of challenge your assumptions and just filter a little bit better. So it's not a great answer, but because, as I said, I don't believe that you can tell somebody something at the wrong time, they won't listen. They're not ready for it. Yeah. So you have to be ready for it. and you have to be a bit more open. So that's my answer.
And you should definitely meditate.
Well, if I say it 6 more times, someone will start meditating.
I think we're up to 3, so we can still fit it in another few times. Look, I totally agree. I think that if I was reflect on my, years as well, I totally agree. It's something that I realized maybe a year and a half ago is just the importance of having time with you, like time without the phones, time without the computers, time without any interruptions, and even time in nature to just really sit in your thoughts and really reflect. I think that, the world is so busy these days. There's so much stuff that's being fed to us every single moment, from the TVs and from the radios and from the billboards and from people in the street and family, friends, loved ones, that I think that, having that time to us really allows us to kind of come back to our center, and really allows us to kind of work out whether or not we're moving in the direction in which is giving us the most and highest level of fulfillment.
Yeah, exactly. And having both read Keith Cunningham, The Road Less Stupid, you block in that thinking time where you're not immediately trying to find a solution. Because when you've read books like The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday, you know that often people want to avoid that obstacle, but that often that's where your greatest growth is. That's where your biggest challenges are. It's where your most learnings are. So, and when Keith really succinctly explains it, is that your problem is getting from A to B, and you automatically jump to a solution that you think is going to get you there, and often it isn't, and you've wasted so much time, effort, and resources because you just didn't spend that 1 hour thinking about the problem on a more deeper level and allowing that time for it to settle and to really sort of think through. So you're right. I've started hiking again, getting back to nature. So yeah, we're kindred spirits. It is finding that free time rather than thinking that I need to be busy all the time, because busy is not productive, and busy doesn't allow you that time to really go deeper, which is where the true geniuses of the world, sometimes they spent 5 years honing just one skill rather than thinking they can master it in a couple of days.
Yeah. I got 2 questions. They're kind of tied together into one in many ways. First question is, do you find yourself being able to switch off thinking about business?
Not very well, no, especially with the jet lag I've had the last week. It's so I've just had a month off traveling Europe. So I was really good then, no work at all. And yes, I switched off, but on a sort of 9 to 5 regular basis, it can overtake your life, and you end up sort of thinking about it too much. So it's a work in progress. Meditation and doing some other things where your physicality, exercise and things, at that stage you don't think about work, but at other times, it can seep back in. It can be quite insidious.
Yeah. It's interesting. One of the podcast guests I actually interviewed this morning talked about how often us entrepreneurs have the inability to be able to switch off. And I remember for myself, I fought it for many, many years, and I found that fighting it did more harm than good. Like random things, I'd be sitting at the footy and, imagine how many people are there, timing by the ticket prices to see what sort of revenue the venue had done for the time people were there. Like just crazy stuff like that. I'll be in a cafe and work out how many people went through the cash register and work that average sale, and like just always thinking about business or marketing or sales as well. The second part of that question then is like, what do you do to switch off? Like, what do you do in your free time?
I've gone back to some passions I had in my 20s. So I've started playing table tennis again. A friend of mine runs his own events business, and he moved office about 18 months ago and put a table tennis right in the middle of his office. So it dominates it there. So I'll go and play with him just for fun, just for, we don't talk about work. We just get in the moment and we just play table tennis. We might have about 5-minute chat about work, but it's all about the table tennis and owning that table. Started hiking again to do that as well. Getting back into some skiing. So I'm doing all the things that I sort of did in my 20s and then stopped. And we do sort of, as life takes over and we're so busy that we stop doing all the things that we love. And we own businesses that should allow us to spend more time doing that. So it's carving out and protecting those times of just the things that you love to do and have stopped doing.
Yeah, I love that. What do you reckon is your core belief that you have about yourself now?
That I've got more of a purpose than probably I've ever had. So I sort of know what I want, and I really spent time. So when I got into the Mastermind business, I spent 6 months thinking, is this right for me? Have I got the right personality? What do I really want to achieve? Do I have any kind of vision? What does this sort of mean to me? So that was a really sort of strong foundation, and that's what gets you through the crappy days and the problems and this is too hard, or not enjoying this, or I don't want to do the things that I know will get me there because they're uncomfortable, like cold calling people. So I think when you've got that core belief and it overrides a lot of your fears, a lot of your doubts, and a lot of the anxiety around being responsible for your own income and other staff and running a business. So that, to me, that's my sort of core essence that I can tap back into, and that's a never-ending well, because motivation only lasts so long. So you need something stronger than that to get you going. So that's it for me.
Yeah, yeah. And for the business owners and entrepreneurs that are listening today that are, maybe not quite where they want to be in business, maybe they've hit a bit of a plateau, hit a bit of a wall, maybe they're experiencing challenges, or maybe they're just looking to take things to the next level, what would be a core piece of advice that you would share with them?
Oh, look, we're all looking for those problems, and we all hit those roadblocks. It doesn't matter whether you are turning over your first 100 grand or whether you're at 5 million, everyone's looking to get to that next level. So in some respects, you're not alone. You are absolutely normal and everyone else is there. But it's probably, you may be at that inflection point where you do need to spend some time to look at that ROI, project yourself, like I did, 5 years forward, and say, what would it look like in 5 years' time? What can I work towards that? Am I still going to be in this niche? Should I pivot? Is this really working for me? Am I getting my best return on intellect? And when you can start to answer that question, it's the very first stepping stone to say, okay, there's more out there. There's something I'm missing. Let me start search and find that. Because what happens is that when we start to look for answers, they start to manifest and appear. And if you've ever listened to Esther Hicks and the universe is source and all these things come to you and variations of that. And it's something as simple as lucky. There's a great TV host called Darren Brown in the UK, and he does all these amazing, you've seen him?
Yeah, yeah.
So he did one about luck, and he turned 5 people who were unlucky into being lucky. And the key thing is, all they had to do was start looking around for positive interactions, meetings, talk to someone in a cafe, led to a business opportunity. And so it's as simple as starting to look for those things. And as you open up your eyes and start looking for those solutions, they will come. But it's being aware of that to do that.
Yeah. Ronan, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. How can the people connect with you?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. I like to contribute and put some ideas out there and share other people's ideas and collaborate with people on LinkedIn. So on LinkedIn, I'm Ronan Leonard, the Mastermind guy. And if people really want to have that discussion about their return on intellect, returnonintellect.com is the website, the landing page. They can find me there.
Yeah, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. I trust that the guys and girls have got a great amount of value out of the conversation today. And I really appreciate your time.
Oh, Barry, thanks for having me on the show. Really appreciate it. It was great to talk to you.
Thanks so much.